and welcome to episode 34 of the Intimate Book Club. I'm John Chadwick, and I'm here with several of the regular people. We're not in Innsmouth today, however, we're on location. Tim Mendes is here. Tim, where are we?
Hello. Yes. We are actually at the Antarctic at the moment in an old Miskatonic University research centre. I believe it was something to do with Mr. Peasley. I could be wrong. But I'm here, John's here, and we're also here with the other host, Mr. Rob Poyton.
Hey folks, sorry that was a bit of a longer bus ride than usual. It's taken a while to get here, but I think it's going to be worth it because we're here today to discuss John Carpenter's documentary, The Thing. And if you'd like to come inside the facility now, that's it, if you'd like to follow us in. Now, don't be worried about the three chaps sat cuddled around the heater there, because they're our guests. We've got some special guests joining us today. I'm delighted to say they've all been on the show before, and we welcome them back. We've got author, illustrator and musician Ben Crawford. Hi, Ben.
Hello.
And the creators, the brains behind the Cast of Cthulhu podcast. We've got James McCormick. Hi, James.
Hello.
And we've got Jim Rohner. Hey, Jim.
Hey, it's very kind of you to say brains behind it. We appreciate that.
Send more brains.
Yeah, and don't worry, we made them all take the blood test.
Oh. Yeah, we'll have to do one before we leave as well, I think.
Yes, yeah.
Now, I'm pretty sure that all our listeners will have seen The Thing at least one time. So we're not going to particularly go over the plot too much today, but we're going to talk about some of the themes and some of the theories around it. And I think it's fair to say that this is in the probably top three list of most people's top horror films and top Lovecraftian films as well. And obviously it's a John Carpenter film. It was screenplay was by Bill Lancaster and the music by Ennio Morricone. Well, perhaps we could start off by talking about the effects, because this was one of the greatest use of real-time effects possibly in a horror film, and maybe one of the last times we saw real effects before computer-generated graphics came in and everything else.
I believe it was Stan Winston who did it.
Rob Bottin did most of it. He worked so hard, he put himself in the hospital, and like Stan Winston sent some stuff that he built to kind of as a stopgap measure. But yeah, I don't know if it was the fumes he was inhaling from the materials he was using, or he just like exhausted himself. But like Rob Bottin had to like leave the production for a while, I think, and actually entered the hospital for a little bit. This is all off the top of my head. I've watched the film numerous times, reviewed the commentary tracks and whatnot, but I didn't study up for this. So I get some stuff wrong, feel free to fact check me later.
I think I read somewhere that he spent virtually a year living on set, and he had a 35-person crew for the SFX, which is quite unheard of at the time. And it does seem like a very intense process.
It was one of his first jobs, I think. He was like really into like getting over with it, doing a really good job and stuff. I think he wore himself out. But the results were pretty impressive.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it was well worth it. For me, I think they're some of the best effects I've ever seen, just not in horror movies, just in anything. I think they're absolutely phenomenal. And the way it's shot in that sort of low, grainy, sort of dark, lots of shadow, it's just an absolute masterpiece of horror effects, I think. I really do. It's like, especially, the dogs, the dog scene and all that. It's just like, oh man, that's nasty. I like that.
One of the things going up into the ceiling, and they're shining lights on it, and you get the flamethrower. That it looks like a real thing, and it's pretty rough.
Yeah, it's great.
I don't think we'd seen anything like it before, really. The nearest thing I can think of was probably Alien. Yeah. But even then, this takes it to a whole new level.
Well, Alien, that's a guy in a suit, which is even more, so that's why, I look great, but the thing, Rob Bottin, I think previously he had done The Howling for Joe Dante, and that's only because Rick Baker was supposed to do it, but he was also doing American Werewolf in London at the same time. He's like, hey, you should try out this guy, Rob Bottin. He's really good. And that kind of like spearheaded that. And then following it up with something like The Thing, you're like, oh, okay, you're a master at the craft. Like everyone else is just like, oh, okay, how can we go beyond this? And I agree with everyone. They really haven't gone beyond this. This is like the best use of practical effects in a film because everything is there on film. And even like with the flamethrower scene, they almost burnt down the whole set during that scene. Like you can actually tell, like watching it over and over again, you actually see them freaking out. Like, oh crap, next cut. Let's cool this area down. But yeah, it's just so impressive, like to the point of just, I mean, even as a kid, when I saw this for the first time and just seeing the head grow, you know, walking away. Oh my God. Like you think to yourself, oh, that's gotta be done. No, that's done right there on set. And you're like, how?
Yeah. And then that lovely shot where I always think of it as like the spider thing. It's so visceral because we've all had that experience. It's going out the door behind them.
I love that shot. It's brilliant.
It's just that thing. You know, have you ever sat in your house and you're watching TV or something, and then you happen and there's one on the wall? It's just such that feeling. You know, it's visceral. Really is.
I lived in a dodgy basement flat once, and it had rats, and it was exactly the same thing. You're sitting there watching the TV, and there's something out the corner of your eye.
I think there's something lost too when it comes to the art form of practical effects, because people forget that it's not just impressive that you have this huge puppet thing in front of you, but there are logistical and production considerations too. How is the light going to interact with it? How are we going to stage it? How are the actors going to interact with it? Where when it comes to CG, there is, and I'm oversimplifying, but there's kind of an element of, we'll kind of shoot whatever, and then we'll just kind of place something in there. Whereas, as we've kind of mentioned, especially with that scene with the dogs, like how they interact with the physical environment and the lighting is part of something that has to be planned, has to be camera tested. And there is that sort of, it's not just the element of, oh, here are actors responding to a physical thing in front of them, but also this is part of the environment of the mise-en-scène, if you want to get pretentious about it, but just the actual physical construction of the set. Whereas you see CGI, and it's like, you know what? It doesn't really matter what the lighting conditions are. We can make up for it later. Yes. Whereas this was part of we have to make sure the practical effects are working in conjunction with the DP, are working in conjunction with the actors. And it was all such a elaborately kind of crafted net. And now it's just kind of like, you know what? We'll just do whatever later on. It'll be fine. Yeah,
I totally agree.
Compare it to the prequel, and you'll see the difference, I think. Which I didn't hate the prequel as bad as I planned on hating it. But, I mean, those CGI effects.
No, I actually thought it was it was fairly competent. I just, you know, it was. I enjoyed it for what it was. I didn't have a problem with it, to be honest.
I think I was prepared to have such hatred for it when I actually saw it. It wasn't that bad, so I was like, okay, this is okay. But yeah, the effects you can really tell the difference because it was made how many years later, and it looks less real.
Yeah.
There is something to do with CG, mind. That I think it's kind of weird. I think Jurassic Park still looks a hell of a lot better than some things that are coming out today, and I can't quite understand how that's happening apart from the budget. I mean, these companies are under a lot of budgetary constraints, and I know from being involved in the animation industry that of what goes on in the background. I mean, the festival that we once had, there were some guys from ILM and Core Digital almost ended up having a fight in the car park over a contract that had gone to one and not the other, and that was mind-blowing. You know, they're under so much pressure, and money's such a big thing, and so I think sometimes that has to be taken into account. But I think there's a time and place for CG. I think when it fails is when what they're focusing on is whether or not it looks photorealistic or not. And at the end of the day, that's not what's hugely important, because nobody cares about that with King Kong
or Harryhausen to some extent.
No.
But I think there is that human element as well. And I might be misremembering this, but I'm pretty sure Ian McKellen said something about playing Gandalf. Half the time he's talking to a tennis ball, you know.
Yes, it was Ian McKellen.
Right, there's not actually a dragon there or anything that even looks remotely like it. So on some level, it must change the actor's performance and their physical response.
I think so, but it says a lot for him, doesn't it?
Well, especially when the actors don't really know what's happening as well, right? Because I think in a lot of this, they didn't know who the Thing was amongst themselves. And I think I read somewhere the temperature was kept down as well on the set, so everyone's already cold and tired and slightly edgy, you know, which can only add to...
Yeah, well, I think that was like brilliant. It was like method acting taken to a whole new extreme because, like you said, they nearly burnt the place down with a flamethrower, so they're really freaking out. They're freezing. They're up at God knows how many hours a day. They're all knackered. It's just like, you know, so... brilliant, you know, because it comes across, doesn't it, that their nerves are sort of fraught.
I think it's great they do things like that.
They took their time developing those characters too. It's like nowadays, like with the prequel, even it's like immediately gets down to like people getting infected and action and stuff. Like the original just kind of really eased you into it.
Yeah.
And took a while to really develop those characters and get you invested in them. So when, you know, Norris turns out to be the Thing, you're like, oh, that sucks, you know? And it was also a shock, obviously, that it's like you had time to get to know those guys and you were invested.
Yeah.
There's definitely something to be said about when it's like the original film and you see it for the first time, you've got no expectations. And then it overwhelms you. By the time it gets through to the 2011 version, we already pretty much know what to expect, don't we? And I thought it was solid, but it did feel very much like it was a remake as much as it was a prequel to me.
Yeah.
And I did read something about the original film as well, that they were thinking of shooting it in black and white at one time.
Yeah.
And I think it was Dean Cundy was the cinematographer on it. Instead went for this sort of very muted palette, greys and that kind of thing, which obviously I mentioned before, the grainy sort of feel of it makes it more real as well.
Would have been like a Razorhead or something, can you imagine?
There's a film we
should
cover
definitely.
Where'd you start?
I know, yeah.
It's like,
by what drugs David Lynch was on?
Just imagine there's a part of it's like, oh, they could have shot that in black and white, and then how would that have affected the box office? Oh, wait, that's right. Okay.
Yeah. Way too hard. Well, as it was, right, it got pretty much panned. There was some, even a Cine Fantastique said, is this the most hated movie of all time? Yeah. Someone called it a moron movie. And then the LA Times said it was bereft, despairing, and nihilistic, which to me is a good review.
That is a good review.
Absolutely.
I'm interested in that.
Yeah,
it's like, have you seen Carpenter? Do you know what's going on here?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it's Carpenter at his best. You know, I mean, he's made a few films which were a bit hit and miss, but this isn't one.
And it's funny that Ennio Morricone got a nomination for a Razzie for his score for this film, which absolutely makes no freaking sense.
That's
it's
ridiculous.
Like, wait, what film were you watching? But again, it's one of those things. It was, and Carpenter tends to do this. He was ahead of his time.
Yeah.
Like he, you know, even though this is a big major budget film for a studio, he was kind of making it's just funny to think it's Lovecraftian mixed with Agatha Christie.
Yes.
How could you sell that? How do you sell that? You really, especially in '82, that's a hard sell. But you know, and I know they didn't even want to use Carpenter for a bit, and they were going to use people like. Don't get me wrong, I love Sam Peckinpah, Walter Hill, but that would have been it would have just been more like let's kill everything. It would have been a bug hunt. Yeah. It doesn't matter who's
I think they originally wanted it to be more like the 50s version, didn't they? They wanted it
like a big plant monster.
Yeah, the plant monster were wandering about the place. The giant carrot.
Yeah.
But so thank God they did. But you know, I enjoyed the thing from another world. You have to say it in that voice. I enjoyed it for what it is, but you know, like we were discussing earlier, the Carpenter version is actually closer to the original novella, Who Goes There, than the 50s version. So it makes sense that he sort of went, "Now we'll we'll go with the novella. We'll ditch Mr. Carrot, and we'll
I'm just blown away it was Howard Hawks. I didn't realise. I mean, that guy could clearly turn his hand to any genre at all and do a good job. The only problem that I have with the original one is that I think the internet has just destroyed my ability to pay attention to something, and they're speaking so quickly that I was having to stop and rewind to try.
You're like that snappy dialogue.
Yeah. No way, no how.
But the films were like that.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
You know.
Is the ending in the book, Tim? Is that what's the ending in the book? Is that the same as the movie? Because that was a big criticism of the film. Was the ending was so unexplainably.
The ending's perfect.
You what, sorry? Oh, yeah, the ending in the film is absolutely perfect. In the novella, no, it's sort of like the threat is neutralized and he goes back and there's a warning.
Right.
You know,
Right.
It's more similar to the ending of Mountains of Madness, really, which was an influence on it.
It's kind of real quick too, isn't it? Aren't they like, 3 or 4 more guys with the thing, so we killed them, and everything's okay.
Yeah. That's it.
Keep watching the skies.
Yeah.
Well,
Red shirts, isn't it?
well speaking of endings, and maybe this is jumping ahead a little bit, but Carpenter is now firmly entrenched and has been for a while in that, like, I don't really give a fuck phase of his life.
Yes.
And anything for him is fine. It's like, how much are you going to pay me? Cool. I don't care. Do whatever you want with it. But apparently in 2002, there was a video game sequel that was released, which Carpenter has said is canon. And in that game, it confirms Childs froze to death and was not assimilated. So neither of them are the thing at the end. Oh. Do we like and appreciate that, or do we reject that?
I always thought that was the case. I like the idea of them sitting there suspecting each other of being the thing.
Yeah, I do as well. I liked it. It's really bleak, isn't it? Really miserable. I like that.
Well, in the video game, the other thing is not only did Childs freeze to death, somehow McCready is in the helicopter saving you at the end. I don't know where he got a helicopter from, but he's in one.
Yeah.
He didn't freeze.
That was a great game. I really enjoyed that.
It was.
I played it again quite recently because it's backwards compatible on the 360, and so I was like, I've still got it. I've still got the original Xbox copy. Here we go.
I think it's kind of nice to know that ending after you've seen the film, or ways after you've seen the film. Then it's almost like, right, yeah. I think if you knew that before, it would spoil it a bit, perhaps.
Yeah, because I spent literally decades wondering what happened. Were they a thing? Were they not the thing?
There's so many fan theories, right? There's one that Charles hasn't got any breath coming out, which they said was a technical thing. There's something about the drink that goes backwards and forwards, I think was another one.
Yeah.
So
like McCready smiles when Childs drinks from the whiskey. He's like, oh, he's infected. But there's no evidence you get infected that. I always figured the thing has to get up close and personal with you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Switch you over. But yeah, a lot of theories. I always liked that they both freeze to death. They're both paranoid.
Yeah.
No, but I like what you said, that idea of like, well, yes, they weren't the thing, but they both just sat there suspecting each other because, that's what the film has built up to, where there's no trust, there's no hope, there's no faith. The kind of ending that James really loves.
This is a hard thing to come by.
Yeah, and personally, I think that's why we even said it's like a really almost a perfect Lovecraftian film, because it's so nihilistic, it's so without hope. Even every time you think there is a little bit of hope, it's dashed. It's something dashed. Wait, maybe he isn't the thing. Oh no, he was the thing the whole time. Holy shit! Or when did he become the thing? I have no idea actually. Like, when did something go out there to infect him? And it's that constant distrust that just makes it a film that I can watch over and over again. You see the little nuances, and then knowing, like we were talking earlier about, none of them knew who was who. Like, wait, in the script doesn't say straight out, oh, now your Childs is the thing. It doesn't say that. It just, You're gonna find out the day of your death scene, I guess, that you were the thing the whole time.
Yeah.
Or you weren't. Like when I always forget the character's name, the dog handler, he gets killed.
Yep.
And he wasn't the thing at all. It was just that distrust. And you're like, shit, he was an innocent person, but that distrust is there. And then from that point on, that's when you think, oh, maybe it's Kurt Russell, it's RJ. Maybe he's the thing, and he's just using it as a basis to kind of make people more distrustful. It works on so many levels as not even just a horror sci-fi film, but just a great like mystery the whole time.
Yeah. Well, that's why I thought they did in the game. I thought they did fantastically because they had that distrust system.
Yes.
Which I thought was amazing. In the game, there was actually a distrust system, and the NPCs, because you go in, you're like a rescue team, and your guys can get taken over by the thing, and it's dynamic. So, when you play one time, that guy will turn into a thing. Next time, maybe he won't. But and they start to distrust you, and you have to earn their trust by like giving them guns, performing the blood test, that kind of thing, or they can turn on you. It's really good.
I need to get hold of this.
Yeah, it's a really good game. There's actually one brought out quite recently. I say recently, probably about 5 years ago. It's an indie game, sort of very similar in style to the original Fallout game. It's called Distrust, and that's basically based on it. It's sort of, it's an unofficial game based on it. It's very similar, and that's well worth the punt as well. That's got very similar sort of dynamics going on. Really good. Yeah.
I saw a word the other day, and it was actually in context of a particular exercise, and it was called the worser. And it put me in mind of this because you're in a bad situation, and then it gets worse, and you think, wow, this is as bad as it gets, and then it gets worse. And I think the blood test scene is just such an impeccable scene of it's almost funny on one level.
Yeah.
It's almost like slapstick of all these guys tied down, all trying to escape. There's an element of sort of slapstick to it as well as the horror.
Now, that brings up something, because it was kind of humorous. To me, it looks like Palmer knows he's the thing, and he knows how the test goes, because he's kind of sitting there, like after the first blood test goes crazy, and it's here we go. It's up. It's everything. The jig is up now. So I was wondering, do you know you're the thing if you're the thing?
That's a good question, because I've often wondered that. Do they know?
Right.
Or is it like lurking inside them kind of thing? Yeah.
Well, this brings me onto the next subject then, because I had thinking about the thing itself, the alien. I've got 4 possibilities, and maybe there's more. I'm sure there's more. So the first thing is that the thing built the ship that they discover. The second thing is that the crew of the ship were infected by the thing that was from outside. Number 3 is the thing was created by the crew of the ship, perhaps as some kind of bioweapon or something like that, and it got loose. And the 4th, well, that's number 4.
Yeah.
It's a shock off.
It's a shock off. Yeah. I'm in the shock off camp. But it's interesting because actually in the novella, it is the spaceship. It was invaded by the carrot monster.
Yeah, I always thought it was that myself.
Yeah, and then crashed.
So that's sort of like a throwback to Alien then too, where you get the impression whatever their names are, the engineers were on the ship, but then it was the face huggers which took them over, kind of a situation.
Yeah. Very similar thing. Yeah.
I actually thought, watching the original this morning, that there was quite a bit of Prometheus in there.
Yes,
actually.
there is. Yeah.
And there was a great scene where the scientist, whose name I can't remember, is actually trying to negotiate with the thing, and he's a tall guy, and he's kind of like, he's just seemed to be doing nothing but listening to him, and then he just plows into one side, and it just seems straight out of Prometheus. So yeah, I mean, I think there were a few nods and winks in the prequel sequel thing. I'm going to call it that. There was a few nods and winks to Aliens.
And you're back to Ben's question. If you are, do you know you're the thing? If you are the thing, is this a sentient thing, or is it like a? Someone said there's a fungus that takes over ants or something.
Cordyceps. Yeah, cordyceps fungus.
Right.
It gets on them, and it makes them climb up to a certain height, bite down on the branches, and locks their jaws so they can't move, and then it takes over them and grows from them out of there.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It's like the video game The Last of Us. That's the concept of the zombies in that. They're not like traditional zombies. They're people who've been infected by the cordyceps fungus. It's got into their brains and.
So is that what the thing is? Do we think, or is there some sentience to it?
In the prequely-sequely thing, there was a guy in the helicopter who seemed to be calming a bloke down, who I was convinced was the thing. And then suddenly his face cracks open and he's the thing himself. And it almost struck me. Actually, they wail, don't they? They cry out in pain.
Yes.
And so I'm there thinking, they don't know. That was my thinking.
Yeah, because when the head spider goes off, it's making this awful keening wail, isn't it? Like, kind of thing.
There's a great little novella called The Things that an author, Peter Watts, wrote, and it's basically from the perspective of the thing, realizing like some of the quotes, like, "I am being Blair. I escape out the back as the world comes in through the front. I am being Copper. I am rising from the dead. I am being Childs. I am guarding the main entrance." Like, it's like trying to understand, and it's like being like Legion, like it's multiple things at once, and communicating just, through mind, like one hive mind. And it's a great little story because it's like, it's just creepy when you read it from a perspective of it. And it's like, it's not misunderstood or, it doesn't know what it's doing. No, it wants to take over. It's not that it's evil, but that's what it's bred to do, is to just assimilate and be one.
Yeah, like the aliens. I mean, that's it. They're just a hive race. Right. They're just a species. They're just doing what they do. They're not doing it out of malice. They're just doing it because that's what they do. Yeah. Yeah,
that's what they're built to do. They're bred to do that. And that's what the thing, whatever this thing is, which, remember, we never really see what this thing actually, the original thing looks like. You only have like maybe a glimpse, but there's a comic book adaptation from the early 80s of the original story, Who Goes There, and the alien if you looked it up, the alien they picked, they drew, is one of the stupidest looking things ever. It's like a green chubby alien with like 3 big red eyes and like,
oh my god,
it's like dreadlocks. And I'm like, I'm glad Carpenter didn't go with that look.
Yeah. I'd rather have the carrot from the first movie.
Right, yes.
It has got 3 eyes, though, hasn't it?
I think that's what it is. I think it does have the 3 eyes.
Yeah, when they're looking at it in the ice block, I think it kind of looks, and it has like some kind of cilia on its head.
Yeah.
And James, I think you said when you were on before about this TV version as well. We were talking about. So shall we?
Yes, yeah.
That was the first one I ever saw. Really, was TV version. Yeah. Well, I was too young to see it in the theater, so my first exposure was that TV version. It's like they had to cut so much out of it that they had to add non-violent scenes in. I think he deliberately filmed some extra stuff for that purpose. So there was like some extra story in it. But
he does that a lot. Like Carpenter did that with the original Halloween also. He filmed that's what is a TV edit you can watch too. And it's actually different. Like it's different storylines and stuff. But yeah, the thing we were talking about the last time was, the Sci-Fi Channel had commissioned a Thing sequel where it would have been in a small town in America, which already is horrifying if this thing actually went to a place with more than 10 people. And the coolest thing was, but they never say how, and I'm still trying to find a script for this. Somehow the thing actually figures out a way to trick the blood test. Like it realizes, because it's got fooled before, but now it's like, now I know how to trick you. And I'm thinking like maybe it assimilates somehow the blood to the point where it's just something like, oh, the blood's good. but it's actually the thing itself is the blood now, like we see in the movie. But now it knows how to keep calm and not freak out from the flame,
Right.
you know, which is already horrifying. But like, you could find some cool, like, you know, drawings, you know, like you know, artwork for the movie, what would have been the movie with like weird creature forms and stuff. But the reason why it didn't get made was it just was going to cost too much money for its Sci-Fi Channel miniseries. They're like,
That was it. Yeah.
we're not going to spend money on that. Let's do a Manskito instead, or Sharktopus versus Crocodile. That's cheap, you know. What could have been? What could have been?
Well, and I can't help but not even rewatching, but rethinking this movie now in the age of COVID-19, and just thinking, I mean, we have a clear-cut case now how a virus has to evolve to survive, and so Omicron is less severe and less deadly, because if it killed everyone that it came in contact with, it would not survive as a entity. And so just thinking, like, how would this thing evolve? Because if it just took over, mutilated, and killed everyone that it kind of came in contact with, like, well, that thing's not sticking around for very long. So what would a future look like with this thing that has evolved? Would it be more human, as that series would predict, like harder to detect, easier to spread it? And it's kind of a horrifying thought. And kind of makes McCready and why am I blanking on Keith David's character's name right now? Childs. So, and kind of makes their, I don't want to say sacrifice more noble, but the fact that they just kind of sat there, or in theory, both of them sat there like, we can't let this thing get out here. And it's just kind of, oh fuck, man, that's heavy, that's intense. They're sitting there waiting to, like, willing to die, to just like, we can't let this thing go on.
Taking one for the team.
Yep. And also to one up each other, because remember, they both had that tension from the very start of the film. It's not even through the film they get, like, from the start, they don't really get along. You can kind of tell there's a little tension there beforehand, and I kind of like that, where they just, like, they're both ultra macho, and at the end it's like, well, I'm not leaving. Well, you're not leaving? Okay, let's just sit here until we die.
It's an alpha male thing, isn't it? It's like two stags locking horns all the way through it.
And I think the parallels with what's going on at the moment is very interesting, because the same year, this came out the same time as E.T. pretty much, right? And I think Blade Runner as well was about the same time. And I think Blade Runner pretty much bombed as well when it first came out. Yes, it did. Too dystopian, and E.T. was the huge film, but how much more prescient the Thing was than E.T. You know, we've not got cuddly aliens coming to see us.
With glowing fingers.
Everyone's masked up and is paranoid about who's got it. Has he got it? Have you got it? You know, it's it feels more relevant now even than at the time, perhaps.
I actually when COVID first hit, it was before the first major lockdown over here. They'd started all the social distancing and all this, and queuing outside of supermarkets and all that. And I'd gone down, and it was just at the start of spring, so it was hay fever season, and I suffer from it really badly. And I'm stood there in the queue, and they had all the plants out. So I just get to it, and I start bloody sneezing. My eyes are streaming, and everybody looks at me like I'm the Thing. I was just like, I wanted a T-shirt saying it's hay fever.
I've seen an invasion of the Body Snatchers.
You know, there were Hindus wearing "I am a Hindu" T-shirt at the height of the war on terror, because they were getting treated similarly by people not trusting them.
It's true.
Well, this is one of the major themes of the film, right? This paranoia and this fear of being taken over, which is extremely Lovecraftian in all sorts of ways. And I thought it was interesting, if distasteful, to find out that John Campbell, who wrote that novel, let's say he shared some of Lovecraft's views.
He did, yes, he did.
Quite an extreme way. Even into the 1960s, this guy was on this.
Yes.
You know. So is that what drives this kind of story again? The fear of the other, the fear of being taken over?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess there is sort of an element of xenophobic to it. Yeah. It's sort of fear of your way of life and yourself being altered by the outsider kind of thing, I guess, you know.
When was AIDS starting? Was that around the same time?
Right around the time of that movie.
Yes.
Yeah. Would have been about early 80s, wouldn't it? About that time.
I mean, do you think there's something to do with that that's in there as well? I mean, I don't know. Just conjecture.
I feel like based on interviews with Carpenter, he would probably deny that because he's never been. He himself has never described himself as really a truly social conscious or political filmmaker. With They Live, that was kind of his most overt, and even he admits that. But he's not one of those guys that that thinks that a horror or director should kind of be political or reflect their society. Now, the argument can certainly be made, like whether you intend it or not, you are influenced by your surroundings, which I tend to be one of those people. But yeah, it is interesting, and I think just speaks to the power of this movie, where it's like, what did this mean in 1982? What did this mean in 1992? What does this mean today? And that's just good art, where it's sort of like, hey, this shit that we've been dealing with as humankind, like, we're going to be dealing with this in perpetuity because we're kind of horrible, and we are not at a point yet where dogs can take over the planet and rule everything better. So, like, we're the best we've got, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I noticed you didn't say cats there because, you know.
Listen, I love my cat to death. If her and her ilk were in charge of things, it wouldn't end well, would it?
I figure they're already in charge because, you know, like Pavlov's dog, you know, you ring the bell and the dog salivates. It's Pavlov's cat, she meows, and I go and feed her.
yeah.
Isn't there some kind of virus you pick up from the litter box that mind controls you? I mean,
yeah. Did I want to be awake at 7 a.m. today? No. Was I? Yes.
Yeah.
Go on, up you get.
My dogs are no different. I have to be honest.
They're nicer about it, though, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So we've spoken a little bit about the computer games and the graphic novels and the TV offshoot as well. Let's go back in time, because I believe that Campbell did acknowledge that The Mountains of Madness was an influence on his story, so therefore it's an influence on Carpenter and I mean, Carpenter is obviously aware of Lovecraft anyway, right? So
yeah, well, he said that that whole what they call the Apocalypse trilogy, he's actually said that they were him doing. He's a big fan of Lovecraft. It was him doing Lovecraftian cosmic horror stuff, and you can see that, especially with the third one, In the Mouth of Madness. I mean, it's right there in the title anyway, isn't it? But you can see that even with Prince of Darkness as well. Yes. Yeah, and they find an artifact, and there's like an evil god in it that takes over Alice Cooper and all his homeless mates. You know, so it's all very, very Lovecraftian. And obviously, The Thing has got massive dollops of Mountains of Madness in it.
Well, and so, I think it speaks something too to just in this day and age. Well, have we moved backwards out of the Age of Enlightenment?
I think we've been going backwards for some time now.
The Age of Opinion, Age of Do Your Own Research, but there's kind of like, there's not many things which are a last frontier. I mean, we certainly have space. We have kind of the depths of the ocean, but even the more we explore there, the more it's just kind of like, oh yeah, there's just a whole lot of nothing. And Antarctica is one of those. It's kind of like, it's vastly unexplored. It's just kind of, it is archaic. I mean, it's ancient. And so, I mean, you know, there was a while in the 90s where everyone kind of thought like, ooh, I think, you know, the internet is going to be this last frontier. And it's like, no, there's just trolls there. They're not the kind that live under bridges. So we shouldn't really delve too deep into that. But this idea of this ancient frozen area where, you know, which was so different generations ago, there's such inherent mystery there. And even if you watch the Herzog documentary Encounters at the End of the World, it's beautiful, but it's also just kind of reminds you like, this is such an almost literally an alien place here on our own planet that we don't really know a ton about. So there's something really interesting there of just this idea of, well, this is a place now that is vastly different from how it used to be millennia ago. What could have been there? How life could have changed and could have evolved is such a fascinating concept. And so I think that's very interesting to me.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, the things that blow my mind away are things like the Piri Reis map and seeing the outlines of the continent. There's just no way. I mean, it's like, where did that come from? Who knew that? For that information to be passed down, and then there's that whole thing of basically with the ice caps melting, what microbes are being released, which have been dormant, and which is the thing.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they even say that in the prequely, sequely. You know,
it's like that worms they found in Siberia, isn't it? That they thawed out, and I'm like, oh well, nothing could go wrong here.
Those little, what do they call them? They're like bugbears or something. Those weird little things.
Tardigrades.
Tardigrades, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, they survive in space.
Yeah.
You know, it's scary. The final frontier is quanta. It's what's within.
Yeah.
And weren't there theories about Nazi bases at the Arctic and Antarctic, and was it Admiral Byrd and Hollow Earth theories and all sorts of stuff around those areas? So it's quite
Oh well, and if you really want to fall down a rabbit hole and investigate some of the crazy thoughts around the flat Earth theory, because what they believe is that there's a rim of ice surrounding the entire disk that we live on, which is you cannot go beyond it, and that is kind of. Listen, they're all crazy, but it's still, in terms of mythology and lore, there is something interesting there, just in the sense of it's this forbidden area outside. So even in crackpot conspiracy theories, the frozen tundra is still kind of it's out of bounds. It's the outlier. So there's something there which just fascinates us as human beings about that kind of environment.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because Lovecraft's Dreamlands is surrounded by the icy waste, isn't it? Where Kadath is and all that. Yeah. So that's interesting because that's that same kind of thing of like, you do not pass go. You cannot get past this point. Yeah.
Yeah.
My geography is appalling. So excuse me. Is Antarctica the north or is it the south? Because
South.
Never.
Yeah.
It's the south. Because the other films are in the north, aren't they?
I don't know, because one has penguins and one has polar bears. Is that right?
Polar bears are in the north, yes.
Yeah. And I did want to make one. Well, there's two penguin connections here. There's the obvious at the Mountains of Madness giant penguin.
Yeah.
But there is also one of the best Thing spin-offs, adaptations, versions ever, which was Pingu. I don't know if you get this in the States. Pingu is a little stop motion. Stop motion kids character, and it's a little penguin. And some enterprising animator did Pingu versus The Thing. And it's like 3 minutes long, and it's the whole film in 3 minutes. Pingu has a flamethrower. It's brilliant. We'll put a link up to it.
Oh, I need to see that. I haven't seen that.
It's just amazing. It's like...
I haven't seen that.
It's just brilliant.
I'd like need to get in touch with the animator and get him to do the clangers versus the me go.
Wait, is the animator Lee Hardcastle? Is that Lee Hardcastle's work?
Possibly. He got into a lot of trouble for it. They made him take it down, first of all, I think.
It might be him. Yeah, because he does a lot of like The Simpsons, but if it was like, Drive or something, like he always like matches up like cartoons with like something horrible.
No, I was gonna say I'll drop it in the chat here, and then maybe you can share it in the show notes. But just Charlie Brown meets The Thing.
Oh, nice.
It's quite...
I have to say that one of my old nemesises was the lead animator on Pingu. Yeah, and Bob the Builder. He stole my girlfriend, so you know. But hey, I've never liked Bob the Builder.
Yeah,
That scar never quite healed, did it?
It's been a long time, but I'm still slightly suspicious of the guy.
Can he fix it? Yes.
He doesn't.
All right, well, the temperature's dropping, so I think we better start wrapping up. And we've got to get the bus started yet. I don't think he left the engine running, so fingers crossed we can get the bus started.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we do have one other important item, Mr. Tim, I believe.
We do indeed. It's all wrinkled up today because of the extreme temperatures, but here it is. Here's Dagon's sack.
Dagon's sack.
Let's have a good rummage and see what we can
Be
find.
careful, it might smash.
Yeah.
Right, okay, well, we have one item in Dagon's sack today, and it's from Kate in Seattle, and it's this is an interesting one given our discussion. What is your favourite ancient aliens theory, no matter how bizarre?
I'll start with one which is not mine, it is fictional. Well, I mean, I guess in theory, all conspiracy theories are fictional. Yeah, I mean that MK Ultra thing turned out to be true, but
yeah.
Cambridge Analytica.
That's it, yeah. But my favorite show of all time is The X-Files, and the overarching thread and plot in that one, which was ultimately revealed in season 9. And yes, season 9 was the final one. I don't think there are anything after season 9. We won't talk about that. It was the idea that aliens started life on Earth and would return eventually to colonize us and retake over the planet that they started on, that they started life on. And there's a hint of Lovecraft in there. I don't know. I don't think Chris Carter would say that Lovecraft was an influence for sure, but that idea that at least that humankind is not really cosmically significant is in fact kind of a mistake or an experiment, and that we are not greater than anything. In fact, there is something else extraterrestrial which is greater than us and will return with great disregard for our hopes, our dreams, and our advancements in civilization. And so that was very fascinating to me. And you know, when I was a kid, I was one of those that I believed in everything: aliens, Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, ESP. And so the X-Files really kind of really just hit me in that regard of exploring the paranormal stuff in a grounded manner, if you will. But that was the grand arching conspiracy of that, was that actually, yes, aliens have been here before. They created us and they will ultimately return. And the discovery of that is the big emotional gut punch at the end of season 9, where once again, this show ended in 2002, but the idea was yep, in 2012, they're coming back, and there's really nothing we can do about it. And it's ugh.
Nice.
That's interesting. Interesting me mention X-Files, because I actually read somewhere earlier, wasn't there an episode that was actually inspired by Who Goes There and the Thing? There's
an episode in season 1, I believe, called Ice, which is basically The Thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Rings a bell.
It's a good episode. It's a really good episode too.
Yeah, it was one of those. It was, and since it was early on, you can kind of oh, this show has some real potential, because there are some episodes in season 1, as is the case with many genre shows, ugh, this is rough. But Ice was very much. It was paranoid. It was tense. It was a very. I believe in that one. It was relevant to this discussion. A little worm that they had discovered in the ice that would get in people and infect them. Mm-hmm. And yeah,
I'm going to have to look this out. This sounds great. I'm going to have to.
Yeah, no, it's a blatant thing ripoff, but at the same time, it's sort of if you're going to rip off something, rip off the best art there is out there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
I'll go. I think I'm going to stick with what's going to be very predictable to all our listeners. I like the Lovecraftian thing that we're basically a science experiment gone wrong. I like that kind of theory that we're some kind of mistake. I'm quite a nihilistic person by nature, so I like that kind of idea that there was these sort of grand schemes and we were sort of an unexpected byproduct kind of thing. You know,
I'll tell you what's scarier than that, though, that we're a science experiment that's gone right.
yeah,
That's far scarier.
yeah, I agree.
We're doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing.
Do you think we're like one of those? I know I think in US schools that you have those science project things at school. Perhaps we're one of those on a cosmic scale. You know?
Yeah, like sea
Yes.
monkeys. Yeah.
Rich Blackett's favourite conspiracy theory. We've had Rich Blackett on the show ages ago now, wasn't it, Rob?
Yeah. We're going to get him back on to talk about werewolves at some point. But yeah.
His favourite conspiracy theory is that there are no conspiracy theories. This is as good as it gets. That's terrifying. That really is terrifying.
I like that.
Ancient Aliens doesn't really appeal to me that much. I'm more of a guy like, I think maybe humans advance to a certain level that's really high, then crap out and just completely collapse. And there's a few people that remember it. They kind of get remembered as the gods or ancient aliens trying to bring people back up. But if you're going to wrestle me to the ground and make me come up with my favorite ancient aliens, I like the idea of, like, I've been going down this biblically accurate angels rabbit hole here lately.
All right. Yeah.
And I feel like if something was like extra dimensional where we can only perceive like 3 dimensions of the thing.
Nice.
This is like kind of what these aliens and UFOs would be. So maybe they're not really from space, but like, you know, from a nearby dimension or, you know, a pocket universe or something. We're only perceiving like a little bit, which goes back to Lovecraft. Because like Cthulhu is kind of like that. You know, you're only seeing 3 dimensions of a multi-dimensional thing. And I think that's probably my personal favorite explanation for a lot of this. And they're not really anything that's like come to guide us or has created anything. They're just there, and we can't figure out what it is. So we make up all this trappings to go around and try to explain it to ourselves. We were really looking at somebody's, you know, 3 dimensions of some creature's elbow that's intruded into our reality.
Yeah, same.
Right.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
It's a 6-dimensional elbow. Because the biblical angels are quite terrifying
Oh, it's
in
nightmare.
their description, aren't they? It's 32 wings or something. It's very...
Somebody's done like a CGI animation of like one of like somebody's filming it from a plane through their little window on the airplane. It's like really just, when you got some extra time, just jump down the biblically accurate angels rabbit hole. Enjoy yourself.
Nice.
To back all of that up, though, I mean, really, it's like humankind pretty much, they saw the symptoms of virus before they saw the face of the virus. It wasn't until we got the microscope that we could see that. And so to think, I mean, that's paradigm shift completely. And there's been loads of them throughout humans' history. To think that there aren't going to be any more is naive. So, you know, until you've got the tools to measure something, you know, you don't know what reality is. I mean, even to the point where we've evolved to see things in a certain way because it helps the survival process and breeding and everything else like that. There's presumably loads of things out there that we can't perceive.
This is why we need a Tillinghast resonator.
As Bill Hicks said, to squeegee your third eye.
Yeah.
That's what the mushrooms are for. Right?
Yeah, the old awaken the old pineal gland. Yeah.
Absolutely. If you listen to Grant Morrison talking about his experience with aliens, he was as high as a kite. You know, which
Yes.
people go,
Yeah.
oh, that could be an explanation as to why you had the experience of aliens. And it's like, well, yeah, but it could also be the explanation as to why you had experience with aliens.
This is it, man. Who knows? Maybe he was actually seeing aliens and not just tripping his tits off.
Yeah, how about you, James?
It was funny this morning when I woke up. I was like, let me just like binge watch a few of these Ancient Aliens episodes, because I've never really watched the actual show itself, and it's actually much worse than I imagined the show would be. Because again, it's just rhetorical question after rhetorical question with experts, quote unquote experts, that are talking about this stuff, and it's just like some guy showing a rock going, see how this rock looks different? aliens.
Yeah. Well, it's that guy with the big hair, isn't it?
Oh, the guy with the big hair. I never knew his name was like
Giorgio something. Giorgio.
Yes,
I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens.
It's aliens.
But then I'm trying to rack my brain. I'm like, you know what? Like my favorite, because it's so ridiculous and it's such a ridiculous conspiracy theory too, is that there are aliens on Earth that are human-like, but they're actually lizard people that are in control.
Apparently our queen's a lizard.
Right. Yeah, that are in control of the world. But then I'm like, I like that one a lot only because as a kid, one of the scariest shows to me at like an age of 5 was V.
Yeah.
And yes.
Especially the reveal of when they finally realize these aliens are not nice. They want to take over. The ripping of the face and you see the lizard face underneath. That's actually scary. And again, it's like goes into my comic book love with the Skrulls, in Marvel Comics and how they slowly taken over the Marvel universe in ways like, oh, they just took over. They're shape changers, okay. They could just be anyone. And that idea of like, there's sometimes I'll walk around and just laugh to myself and going like, yeah, that person's a little weird looking, probably an alien. It's like the Men in Black thing where like, oh, the people you think are aliens, yeah, they probably are. They're aliens. It's just they live a normal lives.
It's coming back to Carpenter again, isn't it? Because they live. That's basically what that is.
Again, They Live is like one of my favorite Carpenter films to the point.
I love it.
Like,
it's hilarious.
And it's such a great takedown of Reaganomics and all that stuff. But plus, wouldn't that be scary? Where the top politicians are these aliens, and they've infiltrated. They've actually, and again, another film about some alien that's like taking over. That I love a lot that nobody talks about is The Hidden. The Hidden.
Oh, The Hidden.
Amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
And how it's actually planning to go to the highest like person it can. It's like, oh, I'm going to go to this person that wants to run for president.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Yeah. What if it takes over? And it's just a common criminal. Like when you think about it, this alien is a common criminal. He loves to get off on the excitement of killing and robbing and stealing and just being this mayhem. And like, to think like it could just get inside you just easily. Again, in that film, it's like a big, disgusting, bulbous worm thing that just implants itself through your throat, and it uses your body until it's dead. Like until your body cannot take any more bullets or drugs or alcohol.
Yeah, I think we've got this week's. I think we got this week's band name there, Rob. Big bulbous worm thing.
Definitely. I think we did. That's a strong contender.
Yeah, big bulbous worm thing. I'm gonna do something.
You got the .com registered already.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think Bernard agrees certainly because I know his tastes in literature. The Serpent Man goes right back to Robert E. Howard, and Cole and the Serpent People of Volusia and everything, which is.
Yeah, the whole reptilians conspiracy theory. It's just like, well, it's the Serpent Man. They're still around, right? Then you just go up to them and get them to say, "Ka namaka landrama."
Brilliant.
Next politician I meet, I'm gonna whisper that to him.
Yes, it's like the Hail Hydra.
Right.
Hail Hydra.
If I go missing, that's what's happening.
If you're ever at Buck Palace for an investiture or something, then I'll dare you. I'll dare you to whisper it to Madge. See what happens.
Clearly, I'll be invited to one of those.
Sir Ben.
What about lonely architect David Vincent from The Invaders? Does anybody else remember that?
Oh yeah, that's a great show.
I have a hard time sitting down at certain bars because of the lamps that they have. They just look like they're going to come down, and
I think they're big dust buster good.
But yeah, I mean, every single person used to have their Avery Alien can't straighten the finger. They used to carry cups like this, if you remember. So that's a clear sign.
So pretty much everyone in Britain is an alien. We stick our pinkies out when it comes to tea.
Let's face it, given our track record of what we've done around the world, then
I was about to say not to be the rude American, but getting back to my colonization theory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's not many nations would disagree, really. But my favourite, if I can just say, my favourite my ancient alien experience.
I was going to say.
There's a giveaway.
My favourite explanation is that we are the aliens. We are the ancient aliens. and that we're not from here originally. I like the idea that we've come from Mars and that we've wiped that planet out, but we've come here now, and what we're doing to this planet is the same as what we did to that planet.
I like the idea of octopus as well. Because obviously I'm obsessed by little creatures.
For dinner, for lunch, for
no. But there is theories that they're aliens.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Because there's also the theory that Europa, isn't there? That there's actual cephalopods.
Oh.
Because apparently there's something in octopus DNA that's unlike anything else on Earth or something. So that's interesting. I think we should all bow down to our cephalopod overlords before it's too late.
Yes. Might I be the first to welcome our new octopoid overlords?
I just used to love the helmets in the original Battlestar Galactica, where they were basically Egyptian, Tutankhamun type things. I love that. I mean, that whole ancient alien thing has inspired so much great science fiction, hasn't it? I mean, even the script of the thing even mentions Eric von Daniken in it.
I was going to say, because that's kind of what I grew up with, reading von Daniken and Charles Berlitz and all that kind of stuff. So my choice was the ancient artifacts and architecture. And the one in particular that always got me was the sarcophagus lid of the Mayan king, Pakal. And it looks like a guy sitting in a rocket ship.
Yes.
Now, the mundane explanation, it's some sort of tree of life, I think, and it's halfway up it, and its roots go down into whatever, and it lifts up into heaven.
Nah.
We all know it's a rocket ship.
It's a rocket ship.
Yeah.
How about this one? I like this one. That basically we just can't perceive time correctly. That basically time, like everything else in the universe, goes round in circles, and it's just a great big loop. And so in actual fact, we see the pyramids as being ancient, but actually they haven't been built yet.
I was going to say, that's going to give me a nosebleed.
We just can't see. We can't see far enough round the curve. And eventually it's going to come back round again. That's all time does. And so we think that the pyramids and all of that are ancient, but actually they're not. The futurists.
Sort of cosmic Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Well, John, I love the idea of that we are the ancient aliens, because I was reminded of a Twilight Zone episode, which I forget the title of, but the entire time you think that there's this woman who's being harassed by this tiny little alien from a spaceship, when at the end it's really the tiny little alien is actually an American astronaut, and she was a giantess. So it's that idea of perspective of like, no, it wasn't she was being harassed by a little alien. It was an American astronaut was invading this giantess home and harassing her. It's like, oh wow, okay, wow, Rod Serling, all right.
Yeah, it's amazing. All you have to do is change the perspective. It's one of the first things I was taught within art and in film when I was doing my training, was just stand on a chair, on a stool, and see the room from a different angle, and everything looks different and strange and odd. And I think
it's like when you if you wear put on a strong pair of specs, isn't it? Everything looks slightly warped and different, and it's I'm blind as a bat, so when I'm not wearing contacts or anything like that, everything's kind of softer and slightly more close.
Have you seen those specs that have got prisms in them over and over again? It just make it look like you're on acid. There was but God, they make me feel ill.
I was going to say Timothy Leary would approve of those, wouldn't he? Yeah.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thanks for that question, Kate. That's a very interesting question. I feel that's another full episode topic in many aspects. Certainly with the Lovecraftian angle, we'll perhaps do something on that. If you have your question for Dagon, he didn't get any spam this week. I'm almost disappointed.
Oh, that's a shame. Did Doctor whatever his name was ever get back to him?
Barley Chumali. We didn't hear from their captain either.
Oh, that's a shame.
But yeah, do direct any questions to dagonsack@outlook.com, and we'll read them out on the show.
Providing we get the messages through the storm, Rob.
Well, there is that. I think we better head back now before that storm really kicks up. Oh, I can hear the engine has started on the bus, so that's a relief. Just before we go then, Jim and James, what have you guys got lined up on the Cast of Cthulhu podcast?
Well, not necessarily coming up, though we do certainly have things coming up. I would like to plug a recent episode because we, back last summer, we had an interview with the writer and director of the film Starfish, Al White. We initially had released it on our Patreon feed. We've recently given up a Patreon feed because we're lazy and have not contributed any content to it. We are very aware of our own limitations. So now out in our main feed is an episode with the conversation with Al White, who is a great guy to talk to. Starfish is a wonderful film if nobody has seen it. And interesting because it was a film that was brought up to us by like, hey, this is a pretty Lovecraftian movie. And then we talk to him and he's like, yeah, I had no idea who Lovecraft was, and it highlights those themes of like a lot of stuff that Lovecraft was working on, whether you realize or not how influential his Department of Redundancy department, his influence is on, society, on culture, on genre. A lot of stuff starts or was kind of fine-tuned by him, which we see time and time again now in film and art.
Brilliant. We'll get a link up to that, certainly. And who was the guest you had on recently? I think I said in my message to you, she was a great guest.
Josephine, yeah, they were great. On our Dark City episode, and just really brought some fascinating perspective about like architectural history, which is like, wow, I didn't think I could appreciate this movie more, and now I did. And that, which is also inspiring our next episode, because we're going to be doing the film Spiral, original title Uzumaki, based on the Junji Ito manga. So that will be our next episode, yes.
Oh, nice.
Brilliant. Yeah. What about you, Ben? What are you working on at the moment?
Oh, I've got a few irons in the fire right now. I've got something coming up in your Corridors anthology is coming up that you're probably keen to have brought up.
Yeah.
That's really the only pressing thing of mine that's going to be making an appearance soon. I've got a few things I'm shopping around. Other than that, I mean, I'll end up putting stuff on my blog, Library of the Schlock Boards, Blogspot. So that's usually where things end up that don't find a home elsewhere. So other than that, yeah, I've got like 4 or 5 stories I'm polishing up to put out here and there as the chance arises. No big project to plug at this point. Just living life, man.
Yeah, man.
Just living the dream.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. All right. Well, we're going to head back to Innsmouth now. It's almost, I feel, being here in the freezing cold. I'm most looking forward to getting back to Innsmouth.
Yeah.
Next time. And what we got lined up for our next visit?
Well, next time we're gonna come around my bookshop. We're gonna sit down and we're gonna have a deep dive into some real decadence this time. We're gonna head to Sesqua Valley and check out Inhabitants of Wraithwood by Mr. W.H. Pugmire, which is one of my personal favourites. It just it's so decadent. It's great. So we're gonna have a good look at that.
Oh, brilliant. Looking forward to that one. Yes, good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it just remains for us to thank our special guests today, Ben, Jim and James. Thanks very much, guys, for braving the Antarctic weather, for making that long journey. We hope you'll get back okay.
Yeah.
And thanks to you for listening. We'd also like to thank our patrons, of course. Speaking of which, we're planning some special patron-only episodes for the coming year. If there's anything as a patron you'd like us to specifically cover, be it a film, a story, a game, or anything really, please do let us know and we'll cover that for you. Of course, you can get in touch via Patreon, via dagonsack, or you can leave a message on our Facebook page. And if you'd like to join our patrons and get access to bonus content and a monthly copy of Innsmouth News, again, please check out our Patreon site. All the details are there. So now, there just remains one task. As we are going back to civilization, we do just need to take a blood test again.
Safe than sorry, eh?
So we've got some chairs, I think.
On this couch.
I'll get the rope.
And, yeah, if everyone could just sit down here, and we'll just get the equipment ready, and here we go.